The knee. As the foot collapses, goes into pronation, what happens to the knee? Let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and mark it so you can see it. And watch what happens as the foot goes into pronation. When my knee is on the sagittal plane, I'm in supination. But as I pronate the foot, what happens to the knee? Internally rotates. What happened to the Q angle? The angle between the vertical and my femur. It just increased. Now the quadriceps has to pull in a lateral direction. Remember, it's attached to the patella. The patella is a V-shaped bone in a V-shaped groove. The lateral side is twice the cartilage of the medial and comes in at a much shallower angle. So what happens when you pull the patella to the lateral side with every step? It rides up the lateral side of the groove, comes down and shears the medial. Rides up the lateral, shears the medial. What happens to the 5-cell thickness of infrapatellar cartilage on the medial side? Chondromalacia patella, we used to call it. Then it became patellofemoral syndrome, and I love the new term, patellofemoral tracking disorder. That's what it's called now. So what was I trained to do back in the early 80s? I was trained, strengthen the vastus medialis. But you can't isolate the vastus medialis, and what are you trying to do anyway? Take the internally rotated knee and pull the patella more internal with the knee? And if it won't stay in the wrong position, I was taught strap a show pad strap to hold it in the wrong position, or a McConnell taping or a kinesio taping. What if instead we actually raise the longitudinal arch, we put the knee back on the sagittal plane, now the quadricep muscle, which was the deforming force itself, has now become a corrective force. Life becomes therapy. Because now the quads are actually pulling smoothly in the groove. Why is that so important? 70% of all running injuries that stop people from running are knee injuries. The vast majority of those are patellar tracking disorders. You have the key to controlling that. By controlling the posture of the foot, you can change the rotation of the knee and make the quadriceps work correctly. So internal rotation causes them to pull laterally. When we isolate the rectus femoris, we can see the internal rotation causes a slight lateral pull. Here it is with the bones. Let's add the muscles. When you internally rotate, you ride up the lateral side, shear the medial with every single step. Now do that 10,000 times by running, and you'll end up wearing through your infrapatellar cartilage on the medial side. The other major knee injury, ACL. When the knee is on the sagittal plane, the anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments are parallel. They don't touch each other. But as you medially rotate the knee during pronation, the ACL wraps around the PCL to the end of its range of motion. Go up to catch the ball, come down, insert the cleats into the astroturf. They can't move. Pronate the foot, you're at the end of the range of motion, and twist. Plant and twist injuries rip your ACL. Most ACL injuries are non-contact. In fact, women have 5 times the ACL tears that men have. Why? Wider hips, more Q angle, plant and twist. How could you prevent ACL injuries? Because ACL is an expensive injury. What's the cost of repairing an ACL? I'm not talking about the $20,000. I'm not talking about the 6 months of therapy. It's a season-ending injury. Ends your season, possibly your scholarship, possibly your professional career. ACL is an expensive injury. We can prevent it. You don't need bigger leg muscles. I went into the Titans locker room. I was casting these guys. They had legs like sewer pipes. They were leg pressing 1,500 pounds and ripping their ACLs. Why? Because they were at the end of the range of motion. What if we put them in the center of the range of motion? Now they had 3 things they didn't have. Time to contract their ridiculously overdeveloped leg muscles. They have a resistive force resisting reaching the end of the range of motion in pronation, which means if they do hit it, they hit it more gently, not with the explosive force. that would rip your ACL. And thirdly, proprioceptive feedback, the knowledge of where your body is in space. Why do athletic trainers tape the bottom of your foot? Because they think a piece of tape is going to stop a guy who can leg press 1,500 pounds? No, because it pulls on the skin, gives them proprioceptive knowledge. Look at the fibers of the hip joint capsule. When you internally rotate the femur, you cause an anterior pelvic tilt, which wreaks havoc with your sacroiliac joint, causes you to splint your paravertebrals. Your paravertebrals splintage causes them to desiccate the discs, dry them out, weaken them. One day you're leaning forward to pick up the soap. You're not picking up the soap. You're picking up the top half of your body. In my case, that's the 150-pound soap. And what happens? I open up the back wall of the disc, push the nucleus pulposus against the weakened back wall, and I get disc bulging and herniation. Meanwhile, posteriorly, 3 muscles begin at the intertrochanteric fossa and go through the greater and lesser sciatic notch. The gemellus, piriformis, and obturator externus, pulling on the piriformis over and over again creates a condition we call piriformis syndrome, and then a little nerve goes over, under, or through the piriformis. The sciatic nerve, the largest nerve in your body. What happens when you pull the piriformis? You squeeze down on the sciatic, ending up with sciatica. In addition, you're tightening the iliotibial band, creating lateral band syndromes, especially in women that have more genu valgum, because pronation increases the Q angle further. So we want to correct the posture. Why do we want to correct the posture of the foot? Because form follows function. Not just in the direction of disease and deformity, but form will follow function in the direction of health. So why did these flat orthotics that I was trained to do back in New York, why did they work? I was taught we put a rear foot post on. Because Root looked down at the back of the heel, as I did, and noticed the heel was inverted, rear foot varus, and he noticed that rear foot varus correlated very well to pathology. So the answer must be, let's bring the ground up to the foot. It makes sense. And besides, can you control pronation over here? It's already happened. Here it's happened. Here it's happened. Even here it's too late. What's the earliest point you can control pronation? Any ideas? Heel strike. And what's on the ground during heel strike? The heel. And what can you do during heel strike? You could tilt the calcaneus in the frontal plane. So we felt that if we could control the calcaneus at heel strike, we'll control the entire gait cycle. True or false? I would answer false. Heel posting is ineffective. Why? First reason, you're taking a round object, the heel, placing it in a round cup. Where do you think it goes? Wherever it wants. Every step, it goes where it wants. You can't control a round object by putting it in a round cup. It just goes wherever it wants. It's free to move a ball in a socket. The geometry is wrong. Secondly, are you trying to control the bone or the skin? The bone. What's between them? Well, you ever grab the skin on the bottom of your heel and move it? There's a big fat pad in a bursa. We did it to 50 people and measured it. The skin moves around the calcaneus 7 to 10 degrees in each direction. So we're putting a 4-degree rear foot post plus or minus 7 to 10 degrees of soft tissue motion while putting a round object in a round cup. Let's see how this affects a real foot. Do you agree this guy has a flat foot? Pretty flat. Look at it from the front. Flat. Everted heels, classic. Flat foot. Now, if he had a plastic foot and we used a 10-degree wedge, what would happen? Well, it would tilt 10 degrees.